Thank you for tuning into the Invest Jacksonville Leadership Summit. You're about to watch panel number 1, New Neighbors, New Opportunities, Smart Investment Strategies to Meet the Needs of Growing Jacksonville. Be sure to like and follow for more content from today's top business and thought leaders. Enjoy.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. Regional growth is not only a topic of conversation, but it's also something that our local business leaders, both private and public, have to focus on when dealing with planning and projects. So our panel today, New Neighbors, New Opportunities, our panelists are going to discuss their perspectives on the increased growth into the Jacksonville area and how that changes the narrative and opens up new possibilities. So we're going to dive right in. So the first question is kind of for all of you, and we'll start here with Diana. With Jacksonville's population projected to reach 1.36 million by 2025, what investment opportunities are emerging to accommodate this growth, particularly in housing, infrastructure, and quality of life?
Good morning, everyone. How did arts and culture infiltrate this panel? We're here because we think about cross-sector support. So when we think about things that are essential, think about quality of life. When we think about the Cultural Council, we serve as an economic driver. When we look at downtown revitalization, and we hear all these conversations about businesses wanting to go downtown, everything that is destination building. You heard the president mention it earlier. We're building a workforce, a talented workforce. When you think about the arts and cultural organizations we serve as nonprofits, all of it goes back to building Jacksonville as a destination city. All of it goes back to cultural tourism. When you think about the Northeast region, when you think about Jacksonville leading that, you have Clay County, you have 30,000 people coming in, a population boom. It's great. You have all these people moving to the Northeast region with all these companies wanting to come here. Quality of life on the tops of all these lists of the new up and coming place to live and do. What do staff do? What are your clients doing on a Saturday night? What are you doing with families? What is the entertainment for them? More art, more culture, more family nights, more date nights, more things to do. Quote Jax often says, if you're bored in Jacksonville, you're boring. From an economic perspective, the downtown area has $105 million worth of economic impact and 30 nonprofits in the arts and culture sector. These are business drivers. When you think about the small businesses and the restaurants, and there's one of the big names in this room have Blue downtown where they go out for lunch and come back every evening. What are they doing with that time? When you think about the future of the Jacksonville Stadium, the fact that it's this giant economic commerce, arts and entertainment district, it's going to go to sleep for 2 to 4 years. Economic impact, do you think that that's going to have in the downtown? And more businesses, and the businesses of their partners, and the quality for residents. What are they doing? And how much harder will it be to bring them back? So we think of arts and culture, and the fact that $115 million of economic impact for nonprofits that we support, 170 is located downtown. Something for policy, that's something also Friday. So Jacksonville Children's Chorus, there's also a Cathedral Arts Project. The chair of the panel is here in the Senate. The partners for partners in partnership with other ones. Shows this and really on this and so businesses can't afford to not have places for a talent to go. It's to talk to a talent. Come to a company, it's to the business to come down to cultural events. You have to build an intentional destination city. When we're thinking about planning in bigger, not just in counties, the cultural council steps into that. Serving as data sharing for the Catalyst Initiative and the Metro Area, we talk a lot about civic vibrancy. Those people I mentioned earlier that are going to Clay County, there's no question about to build more transportation to accommodate these huge population growths. So when we talk about Jacksonville, we do want to just not looking for job games. Just not going to say Saturday, go for it, and exit for just like we think about outside of Georgia. So, you know, so sharing with everybody is when you think about arts and culture, it feels like a feel-good thing. It feels like it feels like a painting on a wall. But really, it's the photographer right there. So we're going to start a $10,000 grant for the first time in the history of the city of Jacksonville. We're going to invested in creating entrepreneurs to have 60 artists, $10,000 each. That's $750,000 in investment with professional development through an organization that is creating the company. So when you think about population growth, quality of life, you know, the business community can show care, because beyond the altruistic feel good, it does in the bottom of the time.
It's awesome. Jessica, from the transportation perspective, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. So I'll touch on two areas, both infrastructure and then also a little bit on the housing side and what the Jacksonville Transportation Authority has been involved in really over the last decade. So, you know, we always saw a steady influx of, new businesses, new people coming into the state of Florida prior to COVID. And once COVID hit, the spigot was open and people were began coming here in droves. And so one of the things that the JTA, we work closely, and I think that's one thing about Jacksonville. If you've been here any amount of time, you know how closely both government and the private sector work together, and the nonprofit community. And so what I would say is, you know, we've done, I believe, a pretty good job in Northeast Florida of staying on top of expanding our roadways. The Florida Department of Transportation has done a great job, expanding the interstate system. We have stayed on top of just both maintenance and repair and new roads within Jacksonville. And part of that is due to the fact that we have expanded extended our local option gas tax for that purpose. Our city leaders, along with JTA, worked on that initiative several years ago. And so not only does that help us to, again, build new roads, maintain our roads, it also allows us to go after grants and different things like that for the Emerald Trail. And if you watch the news over the last year, the JTA, along with the city of Jacksonville, our state partners and our federal partners, Jacksonville was awarded $147 million to build our Emerald Trail in downtown Jacksonville. So it's a 33-mile network that will be, a mobility option for people to walk, to bike, to interconnect the various neighborhoods that are part of that. And so we're excited about that. So I think we've done a really good job, to date at staying on top of our infrastructure needs. Obviously, because that spigot has been open, we're really going to need to look into the future of how do we plan for this continued growth, because it's only going to become, greater as the years go on. And so that's something that and we'll talk about that in a little bit with one of the other questions. But on the housing side, I want to talk a little bit about this. Probably about 10 years ago, the Jacksonville Transportation Authority really started focusing. We took a look at, as we have built roads over the decades, highways, bridges, we had a portfolio of a lot of properties that leftover properties that we didn't use once the roadways were built. And so lazy assets, we took a look at that. We did an inventory of it. And we really put it out there to the private sector to say, hey, we've got these properties available. Some we sold. Others we are the properties that are located around our transportation hubs. We have entered into development agreements with the private sector, long-term lease agreements for the purposes of building housing, retail, creating more density around our transportation hubs. which provides transportation options to those who are living there, visiting those locations, and so forth. And so that's an initiative that we really took on kind of over the last decade. And so, those are the types of things that we can do that will help with housing as well as transportation, moving people in Jacksonville. And so there's also, with the move of affordability in Northeast Florida, our board made a decision to have, like when we're partnering with the private sector, we have a portion of those housing units committed for workforce housing. And so, these are ways that we as a government entity can partner with the private sector to really help, create a quality of life that people are going to want when they come to Northeast Florida.
It's awesome, moving in the right direction. Robert, from the port perspective.
Yeah, so hello. Sure. So from a port perspective, there's two areas I think that are significant. One is the infrastructure at the port itself, and then there's the infrastructure that's outside the port. So the infrastructure in the port over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been well over $500 million in investment in capital infrastructure at the Port of Jacksonville. So that includes a major project to deepen our shipping channel down to a depth of 47 feet, which is very significant for us and has been very significant. We bought some of the largest cranes on the east coast of the United States, ship-to-shore container cranes to be able to load and unload these very large cargo ships. Each of those cranes is around $15 million a piece. For a crane, we've done road work, we've had buildings built. So a tremendous amount of capital investment in the Port of Jacksonville because we compete for this business. We want these cargo ships, we want the jobs that are associated with them. We compete regionally, we compete some degree nationally, and a lot of these companies making decisions are global players. Those decisions are being made in places like Hong Kong and Geneva and Marseille, France, and London, England. And so they have an expectation that you're going to have world-class facilities, and we do in the Port of Jacksonville. But I think that's just kind of a starting point. I think for me, what's even just as exciting and maybe just or more impactful is what's happening outside the gates. And that is all the companies that are coming to Jacksonville, investing here in facilities and manufacturing, import distribution, for example, that are using the Port of Jacksonville. So what happens is these are companies that are coming and saying, I need to open a facility somewhere, usually in the Southeast United States. And I need to do it in a port city because I need a port to import my materials or export my finished product or whatnot. So by virtue of having a modern port with a deep shipping channel and modern port facilities, Jacksonville we're on the short list. Hey, we will consider your city for an investment in our facilities because you have a port here. So, just at JTA, one of the big projects they worked on very successfully was to bring the company Holon into Jacksonville. For those of you not familiar, Holon's a German manufacturer, and they're going to make the world's first large autonomous kind of people movers right here in Jacksonville. And they had a whole bunch of things they needed. And one of those was they really wanted a port city so they could import some of those raw materials and they could export these finished units when they were completed. So Holon's going to make a major investment in the Port of Jacksonville. There was a Spanish tile company called Cosentino, if you know Travertine tile and like countertops and flooring. They were looking for somewhere in the United States to open their first U.S. manufacturing plant in the United States. Well, they chose the Port of Jacksonville. They're going to spend something like $300 million on the west side to build a new manufacturing plant, hire hundreds of people to import this tile and do manufacturing of this product for them. Well, they chose the Port of Jacksonville in a large degree because they chose the city of Jacksonville in a large degree because there's a port here where they can import that tile and if they want to export their finished product. There's a company called Shore Manufacturing. Many of you never probably heard of it, but they opened recently a 130,000 square foot facility in Jacksonville. They import and distribute sanitation wipes that are used in restaurants that you see people wiping down countertops and whatnot. They're doing that out of Jacksonville. So all of this is our facilities that are private sector investment well outside the Port of Jacksonville, but all companies that rely on the Port of Jacksonville. So I like to think of the investment that's made in infrastructure in the Port of Jacksonville. It's not an end to itself. It's a means to an end, and that is to create the capability So we know that we can have these larger ships coming in and out to create this shipping capability so that the Cosentinos and the Holons and the shore manufacturers will invest in the city of Jacksonville or invest in Northeast Florida and create jobs and tax base and economic impact for us, leveraging the port to do that. So there's a tremendous amount of investment going on in infrastructure within the gates in the Port of Jacksonville. There's going to be more infrastructure being built in the Port of Jacksonville. But I think just as exciting as seeing all the development, commercial, industrial, manufacturing, distribution outside the gates as well.
Fantastic. And I want to follow up on the investment concept here. And we'll start with you again, Robert. What strategies can investors employ to mitigate risks associated with climate change, such as intensifying storms and rising insurance premiums, capitalizing on Jacksonville's growth and that investment you talked about?
Well, for us, we're very facility heavy. Okay, so Jacksonville Port Authority, we're basically a big landlord. We own about 1,500 acres of property all along the St. Johns River, 5 facilities, there's 3 cargo terminals, there's 1 railroad yard, and there's the cruise terminal. So those are all of our facilities. So from our standpoint, we look at something like climate change. Is our facilities resilient? Are they being designed and built to accommodate whatever might be coming down the pike? So, for example, our ship berths, for example, are built with the notion that there could be a potential rise in sea level, for example. So I think for most investors, if you're from a facility standpoint, it's knowing that a lot of these facilities are going to last decades. A lot of these facilities last many, many, many years. And are you appropriately designing and building these facilities, not just for today, but knowing 10 years, 15, 20 years, 30 years, whatever the lifespan is of the facility, knowing that things could change between now and then.
And Jessica, how is that affecting what JTA is doing?
Yeah, obviously kind of along those same lines, whenever we're building facilities and so forth, taking a look at that, if I'm thinking about, from a government standpoint, what resources are available to investors, to plan for those types of things. The city of Jacksonville several years ago, under the Curry administration, they brought on a chief of resiliency, and that position remained with Mayor Deegan. And that report was actually completed earlier on in her term. And I mean, if you go to the city's website and you pull up it's called Jacksonville Resilient, and the amount of information that is within that report and the level of detail that went into putting that report together, I mean, to me, that would be the first resource or tool that I think would be helpful for anyone looking to come to Jacksonville and invest in Jacksonville, build in Jacksonville. It's pretty amazing what I think our city put together, and rightfully so, because we're surrounded by water everywhere.
Yeah. Diana, from a arts and cultural perspective, how is that impacting things?
We're talking about long-term climate adaptations. Oftentimes people are unaware that public art can serve as a real spearhead to those adaptations. When we think about urban planning, we also think about urban cooling. When we think about a downtown area, a concrete jungle, and when places get overly hot and overly overwhelmed, and we have a green structure, maybe it's a green building and sustainable living of infrastructure, public art, where you're helping to actually cool urban space while you're adding, eco-friendly alternatives, while you're adding beautification. People often think of public art as beautification, while you're adding interactive elements for the people who are thriving. We also do it for stormwater. When you see public art pieces that have actually captured stormwater and put it back into the ground in real time, you can use public art for a lot of different aspects of utility. And that's what I think it gets lost. Oftentimes you see a sculpture in the background and you think that that's great or bronze bust or whatever the idea of public art is. But you can actually use it for infrastructure, for setting, airports. You often see a lot of public art where you're going in, you're sitting down, you're plugging in your laptop. You can utilize it for the space and place to have a cultural experience and exposure that you wouldn't otherwise. And the climate adaptation part comes into thinking about the materials that you're using, the use and purpose that it has, and the burning room as a rich cultural experience. They're one of the as well as the primary events that we've seen, some of the large events and festivals and economic impact that they're bringing. There's also a lot of trash and cleanup and waste that comes with having thousands and thousands of people in one space. So the link between keeping things clean, eco-friendly, and climate very much leans into this idea of how we're managing the people in the place through the infrastructure that we have in public art and cultural facility and exposure and event management can play a huge piece of that.
Fantastic. Jessica, a question for you. In addition to transportation solutions like the First Coast Rail Transit-Oriented Development Project, what other innovations are necessary to enhance connectivity and reduce congestion in the region?
So, I think various mobility options are key to, to the growth and moving people around Jacksonville. Jacksonville is large. It's a large county, and I think what's most important is that we offer, a couple of the things that the Jacksonville Transportation Authority has done is, we're used to getting into our cars, right? When I turned 15, I had my learner's permit. 16, day I turned 16, I, went and got my license. We are a driving centric community. And over time that will eventually change. But what we've done at the JTA is deployed various mobility options for people to get around. So we have a fixed bus service. We've had that for decades. We also implemented over the last 10 years, the bus rapid transit system that goes through the major arteries countywide to get people to and from, connecting from St. Johns County, from Clay County into the downtown area. And so we've made an investment into that too. What's interesting about a bus rapid transit system is that, we've seen the federal government move from just automatically funding rail in cities across the country to first step, let's implement bus rapid transit, which sort of traverses in the same way that a rail network would. But the feds have wanted to see those types of systems prove out before they then come in and make the major investment into rail and those, those types of things. What I will say about the bus rapid transit system is we took a look at the economic development activity that has happened along those major arteries and around those, around our hubs and our stops along the corridors. And we've seen significant growth. And so we also have door to door service, and we've got 17 zones across the county where we will provide door to door service through our Ready Ride program, which allows people to traverse around. Maybe you don't want to get on a major, maybe you don't want to get on a bus line, but you can get a Ready Ride vehicle to take you from your home to a grocery store or to dinner and back. And so those are, we've really looked at diversifying what sort of transportation options that we provide within the community. And then, kind of moving it into the future and looking at the future of transportation. Robert mentioned this earlier about Holon, autonomous vehicle manufacturer coming to Jacksonville. And it's because of the JTA's program known as the Ultimate Urban Circulator, or the U2C. And so that is a downtown, when it's fully built out, it will be a 10-mile network within downtown Jacksonville, utilizing autonomous vehicles to move people. And so, those are the types of transportation options. We know that AVs are going to be a way of the future. And so, beginning to integrate those types of mobility options within the community is something that, we want to get ahead of. So,
Robert, for you.
I think this works now.
The harbor deepening project allowed the port to attract larger vessels and new trade opportunities. How have expectations borne out, and what challenges does the port still face in terms of commercial growth? And how is the port positioning itself to attract even more opportunities?
Yeah, so harbor deepening, I would argue, so we had our major shipping channel, our harbor was deepened from a depth of 40 feet to a depth of 47 feet a couple of years ago. It's the same depth now as our biggest competitor, the Port of Savannah. We both deepened almost exactly the same time to 47 feet, kind of equalized that really critical factor, because shipping lines are making these ships bigger and bigger and bigger. They need deeper and deeper water in which to operate. And so basically these global shipping lines had told ports really all over the country that, if you have the facilities, that including the deep enough water for our ships to operate, you're really in the game for us to bring business. But if you don't have deep enough water, then we're going to have to move those ships to ports that do have deep water. When we have deep water, and for me, that's always been, I looked at harbor deepening as a long-term play. That is, this will be something that will accrue benefits to our port and community for decades. So I was really pleased that we deepened the harbor a couple of years ago, and within 30 days, we instantly started seeing much larger ships. So just to give you a couple of concrete numbers, prior to harbor deepening, when our ship was at a relatively shallow depth, the largest ships that would come into the port of Jacksonville on a regular basis, carrying shipping containers, the big 20-foot, 40-foot long boxes, those ships could carry a maximum of about 10,000 containers. That's on a ship. Now, not all those containers get on and off any given port. They go to multiple ports, loading and unloading, maybe a few thousand get off at each port, but that each ship could carry around 10,000 containers. That was the capacity. That was the largest ship that could come to the port of Jacksonville on a regular basis. Immediately after harbor deepening, within weeks, some of the shipping lines upsized those vessels to now carry 14,000 containers on a ship. And I just looked at some numbers recently and saw that our first quarter, we went on a fiscal year, starting October, and our first quarter of this year, we're running about 14% ahead of what we were running in the quarter prior to harbor deepening in terms of shipping containers. So the return came much faster than I thought it would, and it's very significant. I would say, without exaggeration, that harbor deepening project, if you look back the last 20 years of the port and probably look ahead the next 20 years in that 40-year window, you're pretty hard pressed to find a more significant project for the Port of Jacksonville than that project. So moving forward, we're in kind of the catbird seat commercially for a number of reasons. One of them is our population. So Florida is the third most populous state in the United States right now, behind California and Texas. So what do a lot of these companies want when they're looking for a port to ship in and out of? They're looking for consumer base, and they want to be near the consumer base because last mile delivery, next day, same day, 2-day delivery is still really important to a lot of these companies. And so they want to be where the people are, where the people are in Florida. And then it was mentioned earlier that the number one thing that a lot of companies look for when they're locating a facility here, in fact, Abby mentioned this in her remarks, is workforce. When companies come to they're looking to build a facility or a plant or something, so the first question they ask is, do you have the workforce here that can accommodate if I open up a facility? Well, this is where the people are. It means this is where the workforce is too. So just from virtue of our large population size, we have a terrific red network. I really think that JTA and I think FDOT for Department of Transportation do a great job on our road network. We have 2 interstates right here, Interstate 95, Interstate 10. If you think about it, the Interstate 95 runs up and down the whole east coast of the United States from Miami up to Maine. Interstate 10 runs from here out to Los Angeles. Well, where do they intersect? They intersect at the Port of Jacksonville, right outside our Talleyrand terminal. So anyone moving north, south, east, west intersect right here in the Port of Jacksonville. We have Interstate 295 that rings our facilities. Interstate 75 is just west. So you have this terrific interstate system. You have 3 railroads servicing the Port of Jacksonville. So you start layering this like a GIS map. You have this massive population base, this great workforce development. You have interstate highways, railroad network, and now these modern port facilities with a deep shipping channel. Tremendous commercial opportunities for us. The last really big operational hurdle for us is, as these ships have gotten deeper and deeper, they've gotten taller and taller. Well, every cargo ship that comes to the Port of Jacksonville that has to dock at one of our cargo berths has to pass beneath JEA's overhead transmission lines. And those lines set an operational height of 175 feet. So ships can't be taller than that. Well, ships are getting much taller than that. So JEA has been a great partner of ours, as has the city of Jacksonville. we've come together with a plan to have those power lines raised over the next 2 years, given another 30 feet of operational height. So now we'll have not only the really deep shipping channel, but the really high operational height to fully take advantage of that harbor deepening project and have even larger ships come into the Port of Jacksonville. And it's not just about also getting more and more business. It's also about retaining the business we have. And this is, I think, a point a lot of people don't understand is a lot of these shipping lines, as they're upsizing these vessels and bringing this business in, they're telling ports, look, I had to go from 10,000 to 14,000 TEU, it's a unit of measurement, container vessel. And I need to deploy these larger ships. And so if you don't have the capability, all the ships are going to those sizes. And so you just lose all the business. So it's not a matter of will we keep the 10s. It's a matter of do you have the capability to go to 14 or do you not? And which means it's either all or nothing. So we are all in terms of the harbor deepening project, the investment that was made. We have the capability. So we're all in. We're getting that business. We're retaining all the business that we had in the past and seeing this growth over time. And because of those factors I mentioned, I think we're really well positioned to be very successful for a lot of years.
Well, I want to thank all the panel. We're unfortunately out of time. I know we had a lot more we planned to discuss, but it's been a great discussion. I thank you all very much.